Yeah, I was so blessed this morning during worship. How many of you guys were just touched by the Lord during that worship time? Yeah. And we're gonna come back to that in a little bit here, but I want to say at the very beginning of us sharing a little bit of our story, both just our long-term journey, but then our recent trip, is that paramount to everything that we and everything that we do and we are is worship. John Piper says that missions exist because worship does not, that the end goal, whether it's to our next door neighbors or across the world, the end goal of all that we're doing in this life is to lift up the beauty of Jesus so that others can gather around him, that others can say, "All hail King Jesus, the Lord of heaven and earth." I mean, that cry it's stirring because it's eternal. Last week, Randy, I think it was last week, he talked about these moments in worship where we touch transcendence that goes beyond our own lives. And that's what we're after. That's what this community exists for, is that we would touch something that's so much beyond us, that's eternal, that's holy, that's beautiful, found in his presence. And so even this morning as we share, I really hope that you hear that this is not our story. This is not just the Grenzes off on another adventure, but that this really is the passion and the burning desire of Jesus to draw people into himself in that place of worship. I thought it was actually very endearing in the sense that I love how this church family is growing and developing. But we got back from our trip. We were in Thailand for 2 months, and we're going to talk about that this morning. We got back from our trip, and we had several people greet us and ask us if this was our first time here. And I was like, I love that, So if you've never met us, feel free to ask us if it's our first time here. But I love how the Lord is expanding who we are as the bridge. And last week, we had such a powerful time dedicating several of our own children, several of this church family's children to the Lord. And Randy talked about how it's important that we have these kind of culture-defining moments. A few years ago, we talked through what the culture of this spiritual community is. But a lot of you weren't here then, and it's like we have the opportunity now to kind of say, this is what the bridge is about, and this is who the bridge is. The bridge is about worship. The bridge is about children, and the bridge is about the nations. And so as we share today, this is not just our story. This is the bridge's story. The other thing that we really want you to hear as we share is that these stories are not all neat and tidied up and finished. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but there are places of discouragement and there are unanswered questions. And I mean, just following Jesus is not a neat, straight, tidy road. There's mess and there's curves and there's things that come along the way. And we really want to express that and also an invitation on how to respond to the Lord in that. So what I'm going to do as we start, just because, again, a lot of you are new to us and we're probably new to you. So I'm just going to take like 3 minutes and give you the Cliff Note version of who we are. So again, my name is Daniel, my wife Carla. We've got 5 kids. I only know where one of them is right now. Our son Zadok. Oh, there you are, Mariah. 2 of our kids are here. The other 3, I believe, are in the kids area. But we've got 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy. Carla and I have been married 13 years. So yes, 13 years of glory and death and everything in between. It's wonderful. But when we got married, each of us had been on these journeys of walking with Jesus, loving him deeply in intimacy, and having been called to the nations. Mine was a little more focused in on the nation of China, about a 20-year history with China. So Carla knew coming into this thing, if she was going to marry me, that she was going to end up in China. So we got married in 2009. Mariah was born in 2010. And then we moved to China in 2011. And really we moved there with our vision and desire was we want to see, especially the young people, but believers across China, raised up and carrying this strong identity of worshipers, of prayer and worship, planting prayer rooms and houses of prayer, and having that become a foundation of this mighty Chinese mission movement that was going to reach the Muslim and Jewish world. If you're familiar, there's a vision called Back to Jerusalem that the Chinese church has owned to take the gospel, following the trajectory of the gospel coming westward throughout Europe and the Americas and now Asia, back across the rest of the 1040 window. And so we worked a lot with the underground church doing that. We were involved in a local mission training school that had about 70 full-time workers in the Middle East. We planted a house of prayer. We did a lot of just equipping the local church. And it was a sweet time. We were there for 7 years, and 3 of our kids were born over there. So we moved back to the States in 2018 with 4 kids. And I had said to the Lord, somebody over there had encouraged us. They're like, why don't you go back for a year? I'm like, no way, I can't survive in America for a year. I'll give the Lord 6 months and then I'm out of here. If you are good at math or know your numbers, 2018 is a little more than 6 months ago. So we've been here for about 4 years. We did not expect this, but it's been such a significant time where the Lord really has knit us into family in a number of ways, but the Bridge family being one of those significant ways. In 2019, we had the opportunity to go back to Thailand. Some good friends of ours at the YWAM base in Chiang Mai were putting on it's about a 6-week training for young leaders from Southeast Asia, and it was called Fire Starters. And the whole goal of this training was to help fuel prayer and worship in China, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in Thailand, in different parts of that part of the world. So we went back and just jumped in and served with them. And out of that got birthed this ministry called Fire Starters, which really carries this vision of looking at indigenous communities and leaders and how we can really fuel them and support them and champion them as they're catching hold of this vision of filling the earth with the glory and beauty of Jesus through prayer and worship. I mean, it really is what we're doing here this morning. We're saying, Hail King Jesus, and our hearts and our assignment from the Lord is, I want you to fuel that cry of Hail King Jesus with coaching and equipping and mentoring and raising up young leaders that will sustain day and night prayer and worship to see all of the lost saved and all the unreached hear the gospel of Jesus. And so just as kind of a big overview, over the last few years, we've been involved developing that training with a team in Chiang Mai. And over the past year have been training communities online, which we'll share a little bit more about. But about a year ago, I met a young leader in Myanmar. How many of you guys know where Myanmar is at? A few of you. We're going to show you a map in a little bit, and you'll get a better idea. Actually, why don't you throw that up now? So Myanmar, which formerly was called Burma, is right to the northwest of Thailand. We got connected with this young leader named Tuang Pu, and he's in his early 30s. And when I met him, he shared with me how during the past year of COVID and military coup and just incredible difficulty in the country of Myanmar, that he had gone to 400 villages to do these 2- and 3-day trainings in worship. He's like, I've trained 4,000 young people in worship, and it's like, now we need more. They need more equipping. They need more encouragement so we can sustain this move of worship across Myanmar. So we began kind of tracking with him, and last spring, we're able to help them lead a 2-month worship school. Some of you heard about that. Some of you were involved with that. Sally, if you guys don't know Sally and Tyler, please say hi to them. They're amazing, some dear friends. But Sally was very involved in that. Rachel was involved with that. Danny Lima, who many of you know. So just kind of this small group of friends in Kansas City got brought in very sovereignly to this move of God in Myanmar. And so we helped with this 2-month worship school. And going into it, they said, hey, will you teach a week? I was like, yeah, I'll teach a week. And pretty soon it was like, hey, will you teach every week? And I was like, only on one condition. We will help you lead this first school, but unto you guys leading in the future. And we'll come along and really just come alongside your leaders. And so that was the agreement. So the school was March and April. And then starting in May, we began doing these 1 month or once a week leadership calls with this group of about a dozen young leaders in Myanmar, young worship and prayer leaders. And as we were doing that, we realized we need to find time where we can just get in the same room with these guys, where we can pour into them and build relationship and encourage one another. So that's all just kind of, the past 13-year journey to this present point of knowing we are serving this team, but we want to get in person with them. And so we planned this trip to Thailand, to Chiang Mai, Thailand. So Chiang Mai, if you could actually go back once, just so you get an idea. I like geography. I like to know where things are at. So this is Thailand. Bangkok is kind of central. Chiang Mai is in the northern part of Thailand. When we were there, I heard a really interesting and significant statistic about Thailand. It's the one country in the 1040 window, which is the most unreached region of the earth, where most of the unreached people groups are. It's the only country in the 1040 window where religious freedom is protected by the Constitution. So Thailand, it's a constitutional right that you can have any religion you want. And at the same time, it's less than 1% Christian. It's 99% Buddhist, even though there's religious freedom. It's really crazy. But Chiang Mai in particular is a significant city. I believe it's a gateway city in the 1040 window. I believe it's an Antioch city where the Lord is raising up a worship movement and a training movement that are launching out missionaries. It's also a city of refuge where you have all of these refugees from Myanmar and from other parts of the region that are coming to find security and asylum. And so the Lord was really highlighting this city. We have a lot of friends there, and so this is kind of where we landed with our trip. Is it your turn now? Oh, yes. Okay. Carla has all the notes, so I got to stay on track here.
If you hadn't noticed, our kids, a couple of them are going to come up and share, but they were adamant that we had to wear our tie shirts.
They want us to be all matchy-matchy.
We did it for our kids, in case you were wondering. We don't usually try to wear ethnic garb when we share about a country, but what do you do
But a few
for the
people
kids?
complimented and said I was very handsome, so I'm very grateful for that. And so as we share today, and as we were processing this trip, really the Lord began highlighting like the theme and the umbrella over this entire trip was family. And we're going to hit on kind of three main ways that it was family. As I said before, this trip is about this family. And you may have heard none of what we just said, and you may not know anything about these regions. But one of the things that we believe and that we as a family need to grab onto is that we're not just a bunch of random individuals living our separate and distinct lives, but we're a community that the Lord is knitting together such that when he brings somebody into our midst that's carrying a certain burden and passion in their heart, it becomes part of the family story and the fabric of this community. And that's not just to say you have to grab onto who we are and what we're doing. This is an invitation that the Lord has planted dreams and passions and assignments in each one of you. And we want to know those because they're part of this family story the Lord's writing here with the bridge. This is a family call. As we share this morning, it's a family invitation that these stories belong to you as much as they do to us. That when the Lord looks and he identifies this community, he says, this is part of who you guys are as the bridge. And that was, as we were preparing and just praying into this, we felt the Lord really strongly saying that this is a family call. And we're excited the kids are in here. Because for us, growing up in the church, we were 10, 11, 12, 13 years old when the Lord began marking us for the nations. And we're believing that part of this family story of the nations means that there is a moment coming where we as a spiritual family and you as natural families, that bow is pulled back and you let go. And the arrows don't only go to Overland Park and Grandview, but they go to Myanmar and they go to India and they go to Afghanistan and other places where Jesus is not yet lifted up. And so we're so grateful that we're part of this family. We were with Randy and Kelsey this week and just saying we are becoming more and more confident that one of the main reasons the Lord has kept us here so long is to root us in this family so that we're not homeless when we're coming and going. That we come back and we say, hey, these are our people, we belong here. And so I want, on that point, I want to say we're so grateful for the prayers and the love and the encouragement and, you know, hearing that there was a Sunday where Randy showed a video and people cheered. It's like that means so much to us to know that you're in this with us and that we're in this together as family.
So we also wanted to share about our family on mission. And so we traveled to Thailand with our 5 kids, and for us it wasn't even a question of whether we should bring them or not. We have done it in the past, but we fully believe in the power of traveling together with young kids, with babies, traveling as a family when you're able to the nations. And so we wanted to show a couple photos here. I think when you think about traveling with kids, there are a lot of challenges and struggles that can happen. It is a lot more expensive. The journey there is hard. There were several long flights that we had to go on, and it's tiring.
For context, long is like 14 hours on a plane.
Yes. And I think the hardest age to travel with is a 1-year-old. And so our youngest is 1, but she survived. She did good. You can just kind of keep flipping as I'm talking here. But we love traveling with our kids. And we feel like the Lord is continually speaking to us about the value and importance of bringing your kids to the nations, having them experience different types of transportation, eating different types of food, learning the language and the culture, and just having their eyes open to the people groups around them and developing a prayer for them. We landed in Chiang Mai, and one of the challenges that we had right at the beginning was we didn't have any hot water for the first 2 weeks, and that was a little bit of a surprise at the home that we were in. It's pretty normal to have hot water, but it was okay. It wasn't a big deal because Thailand is a hot and humid place, so no big deal. We'll take cold showers. But shortly after arriving, we all started to get strep throat. And we had fevers and really painful sore throats. And so just imagine taking a cold shower with a fever, and it was hard. So Ellie had hot baths in the biggest pot that we could find. So she had warm water, so she was fine. The rest of us just endured. But there were little challenges like that we had to persevere through. But even in the midst of it, we just continually saw how resilient and how flexible our kids are. And kids in general are so flexible. Even when you have to mix up their schedule or get adjusted to a time zone or maybe have a different nap schedule or whatever, like they're going to go with it. And as long as they're with you and safe, they're going to be okay. And so we saw continually the Lord just releasing grace upon grace for our kids. And I think beyond just grace, we just saw how much our kids really loved it in Thailand. And they were just continually speaking about how beautiful the land was, or the things around us, and things that we didn't even recognize as beautiful, but they just, well, this was beautiful. We took them towards the end of our trip. I just wanted to throw in a couple of fun slides, but we went to some of the most beautiful beaches in the world and took our kids snorkeling, which is very easy to do, very affordable when you're in Southeast Asia. So when you go on a mission trip and bring kids, you want to have fun and have adventures along the way. So we had an amazing time at some beaches there. And in a minute, if Zadok and Mariah, you guys can come on up. A couple of our kids are going to share some things that the Lord impacted in their hearts. But just wanted to share that I think the main thing that the Lord is really speaking to us about in bringing our kids along on this trip was the importance and value of just going slower. And sometimes when you think about a short-term mission trip, you think boom, 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 and we're going to have big impact and bring this many people to the Lord or work this many hours. And you can't do that with kids, and you have to move at a slower pace. And actually, that's okay. And so we were starting to see what success means through a different lens and get a different perspective of that as the Lord was speaking to us through just having our family there and different dynamics and the power of going slow. slower just allows you to have more time to just sit with people and be relational, which is a key thing, especially in Southeast Asia. They love it when you can just be with them and sit with them for hours and talk and be heart to heart and minister to them. And so we love doing that with our kids and having a slower pace, which it wasn't just about impacting those around us, but really how is the Lord impacting our hearts? How is he impacting our kids' hearts? And allowing there to be time for that to happen.
Yeah, when we think about the fruit of our trip, the fruit we're most jealous for is right here. You know, the young people we're most jealous to see impacted with a passion for Jesus and seeing him made known, it's right here. And so it was a gift having them with us.
So we wanted to just have Zadok and Mariah just each share a little bit about how Jesus impacted their heart on the trip to China. Did you want to go first? Or you want Zaid? Okay, Zaid, you're going to go first. So how did Jesus impact your heart?
So when we first got to Chiang Mai, so when we first got to Chiang Mai, I was really judgmental and offended and angry at the people because there were so many idols and temples. But one day we were walking by a shop and a man asked me, would you like to buy something? And in that voice, it felt to me like he had a longing of something more. And I shared the gospel with him, and he gave his life to Jesus, and God filled me with compassion for the Thai people.
This is a picture of Zadok on the left sharing the gospel with this elderly Thai man. And then we went back a week later and visited him again. And he just kept saying, my heart is so changed. My heart is so changed. It was amazing. Mariah, how did the Lord impact your heart?
I really like the tropical weather and the plants and the language and the people. And when we went to Mesat, a village on the border of Myanmar, we helped lead a children's church, a church that had a children's home. And all the kids seemed so grateful with what they had, and it helped me want to be more simple.
Amen. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. So we don't need to share anymore. I think we're done now.
I know, that's the summary.
Let's just go have lunch at the Gagne's.
Say it's a good thing that we're not having the soup here, because I think we'd all be so distracted by the smell. So the things that we actually kind of went there for and that we did while we were there really fit into, kind of these three categories of building family. We're going to share on just these three areas. Worship. That's my cue to stop talking. So the three main things that we really set our hearts to for really helping to build family there was worship, equipping, and encouragement. So we're just going to talk about those three things a little bit this morning.
So the first one was worship. And in Chiang Mai, there is a little prayer room at a YWAM base there, and it's my favorite prayer room on the face of this earth that I've been to so far. And we had some amazing times there as a family. Right from the very beginning, we wanted to establish regular times in our schedule to just worship together and building that family altar, not only in Thailand, but obviously here in Kansas City. We so desire that for our family. But we loved being able to minister with our kids and having them up on the mic and singing, as well as worshiping in small group times and joining in worship sets with the YWAM team that is regularly practicing rhythms of worship and prayer at their prayer room. We just loved seeing our kids being able to just jump in, whether it was through dance or prophetic song or just being in the room and surrounded by the Lord's presence and hearing worship in different languages just really touched their hearts as well as ours. I just wanted to read the scripture to you guys out of Psalm 78, and the psalmist is encouraging the people to look back to the sayings of old. In verse 3, it says, "Things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from our children, but tell them to the coming generation, the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done." And so this really was a theme of our time there, was just being able to worship the Lord, whatever our circumstances were, but setting our eyes on him and letting that really be a focus of our time.
Yeah, again, worship is paramount. I believe that in this generation, the Lord's changing the face of missions to be, as Randy was saying earlier, to be this movement that's led by the singers, the dancers, the musicians that are pouring out their love to the Lord. And I think some people hear, oh, you went to Thailand and like one of your main focuses was worship. Like, couldn't you do that here? Yes, but we recognize the Lord is looking for resting places in every place geographically. And as we gather to worship, he comes and inhabits our praises. And so this was really a key part of what we went to do. We want to gather, we want to worship, we want to seek the Lord with Thai people and Burmese people and other missionaries that are there. And so we had these regular rhythms. It was most days where we were joining with, whether it was the YWAM team or another team that we're going to share about, joining in different worship moments day by day, having our kids part of that. And our encouragement, something the Lord was really highlighting to us, is number one, it took us kind of going to Thailand to get this rhythm in place in our family. But we want to invite you guys that we as families and as the Bridge family would create these spaces of worship in our daily lives. You know, for you to go home, husbands and wives, and say, what can it look like for us to set aside time each day to gather with our kids or just with each other, or singles to gather with some friends and have this be a rhythm that defines who we are. It's so significant. I believe it really is the expression of what Carla read in Psalm 78. As we said before, we've been working with, if you could back up one, with this worship movement in Myanmar. These are just a few pictures of two different ministries that we're really connected with that are raising up young people. Interestingly enough, the one on the bottom right, the ministry is called The Arrow. I thought that was pretty cool. We might need to somehow incorporate that even more concretely into the Bridge. Start carrying bows on our back or something. Is that allowed? Yeah, okay. But worship is exploding across the earth. And it's so interesting how, this was not our idea. We didn't go start something. We had people coming to us and they're like, young people are getting caught up and they have this vision and this passion that they want to set up these worship centers to fill the land. And it's really interesting when you think about Myanmar, the context, where it's a nation that's under military coup, incredible persecution, there's a massive food crisis right now. People have lost everything. The economy is crippled and crumbled. And in the midst of it, it really is this Psalm 27 moment where David says, even though my enemies are against me and they're pressing in hard after me, the one thing I'm setting my eyes towards is the beauty of God. It's to worshiping his name and creating a place for him to dwell in our midst. And so we were so encouraged to be part of this movement. And so worship is paramount. Within the context of that, we went over to do some equipping. As I said before, we have been working with this team in Myanmar. These are the leaders that we were bringing to Chiang Mai to spend a couple weeks, about a week and a half with them. They're precious, precious people. Most of them are in their early 20s, and they're in full-time ministry serving the Lord. None of them have a job. None of them raise support. None of them get support. Somehow it's working for them right now, but we're so honored to come alongside of these guys. So the plan was we're going to bring them to Chiang Mai for 8 days. We had bought their plane tickets. We had gotten all the papers that they needed to get their visas. On August 20th, they flew from Myanmar to Bangkok. And when they're in Bangkok, one of them contacts me and said, immigration told us they're not letting us in, that we have to go back. And all of a sudden, all of these plans that I had been making for several months were kind of hanging in the balance. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. We actually were gathering with a number of other families at the moment who just shifted into this hardcore intercession. And so over the next few hours, I'm talking with them. I'm talking with immigration officers. I'm trying to figure out how can we get these guys out. I end up flying to Bangkok that night to try and get them out. And finally at 3 a.m., after we'd tried every avenue, we realized this is not going to change. And they said to us, we want to go back. And when we get back to Myanmar, we'll look at another way to come to Thailand. So they flew back that next morning. I flew back to Chiang Mai. We're talking about, can we get them across the border by land? And in the meantime, they text me and say, we've just been sent into quarantine for 6 days. So we're like, man. And it was really this moment. This is just with, where we kind of, you think of missions and it's all these testimonies and glorious moments, but this was a moment where I was just crushed. Number one, it's like if you go to the next slide, we had brought this team together to Chiang Mai of 4 families. One of them flew from the States to be there for this equipping. Several of them flew from other parts of Asia. And I'm like, we've put so much money, so much time, so much energy into this. And I'm just starting to feel really discouraged and really down. And the Lord speaks in that moment. And this is a word for all of us that we're gonna circle back to in a few minutes. But he said to us, how are you going to respond? He's like, I'm looking at your response. You can't change what happens, but you can change the posture of your heart in this moment. And he said, what I've purposed will not be stopped. What I've set my heart to do and what I've spoken forth will not be stopped. And so we felt like, okay, we're going to keep trying to get them out of quarantine. We're going to keep trying to get them to Thailand, but we're going to plow forward with this. And so thankfully, as he flips through these next few pictures, you'll see kind of the setup we had. The YWAM prayer room had an incredible tech setup where we could just pivot to Zoom. They were able to get really good Wi-Fi connection in the quarantine facility. They had nowhere to go. We had nothing else to do. And so for the next 8 days, we locked in with these guys. We'd have worship times in the morning, prayer times, prayer ministry. I was blown away at how much significant prophetic ministry could happen over Zoom. Like, I was really not expecting a whole lot. And yet they were deeply marked. And even backing up, we were processing debriefing with them when they were in quarantine. Just a really hard day. None of them had ever flown overseas. Their first experience outside of Myanmar, they get sent back. So we're debriefing with them. And the beautiful part of this whole thing is that throughout that whole journey, we're zooming in with them through that day when they're in the basement of the airport. Like, they were laughing, they were singing. Like, they just had such a grace upon them to walk in joy. And as we're debriefing with them, they began sharing with us just tears in their eyes. They're like, when we heard you guys were praying for us, and when we heard you were flying to Bangkok to come, like, we felt the love of the Father in a way we never have before. One of the girls was like, I was so confident we were getting out. When I heard you were coming, I put my shoes on. Sometimes other places have kind of this Rambo view of Americans, like we can get anything done, we can bust anybody out. But just the way the Lord met them was so significant. So we had these 8 days of training and equipping. On Zoom, they were in their room. Yep, you're good. We were on the computer screen with multiple camera angles. And we'll show this little video that kind of gives you a glimpse of what one of these ministry moments looks like.
Father, we declare, Lord, you are the God of this nation, Father. You are the Father. And the living waters of living water will overflow, oh God, over these nations, Lord.
So they're joining in their quarantine room. We're in the prayer room.
And yes, we declare freedom, even healing, oh God, of this nation, Father.
And though it was still like I'm so tired of doing Zoom with these guys. We've been doing Zoom for months. Sorry, you could pause that. There we go. I thought it was over sooner than it was. It was still really sweet. The Lord really moved. We had sessions on things that they just had never talked about before. We had a really powerful afternoon talking about physical purity with these guys. And they're like, nobody's talked to us about this. And this is such an issue in our generation. And leading them through some healing and deliverance. We had a session on forgiveness where, again, they're like, nobody's ever told us we need to forgive our parents for abandoning us, or we need to forgive this friend for betraying us. You know, and leading them through these moments where the Lord was really touching their hearts was really incredible, and a joy to be part of that. And so, you know, in the midst of the challenge, the Lord was saying, what's your response going to be? And just the encouragement that we wanted to bring to you guys is that the Lord will never waste a moment of difficulty, a moment of pain, a moment of setback, a moment of disappointment, if we will respond with a yes in our hearts to him, to enlarge our hearts, to expand his presence within us. And we're going to take just a minute at the end. I'm going to come back into just a moment of responding to that.
Just wanted to mention that in the photo on the left here, Zadok is praying for Twangpu, and Daniel and Twangpu have been meeting for about a year and a half on Zoom, and he is the leader of their team, and so they were trying to come from Myanmar, but he was flying in from Cambodia because he was taking part in a YWAM DTS there, and he got through with no problem. There were no stops with immigration, and so another fruit of this time was we were able to sit with Twangpu and be with him. Even though we would have loved to be with this entire team, we had the joy of really ministering to him and sowing into this leader who's sowing into thousands in Myanmar. And there was so much fruit in that, so much that I don't think we even can comprehend yet, but being able to encourage him and pray for him and just grow in relationship face to face. And so we were really thankful that Twangpu was able to come through without any issues there.
Yeah, it was a gift. I remember picking him up at the airport, and we'd been Zooming multiple times a week for a year. You know, and when he sees me, he just starts weeping. I'm like, Lord, for this one, it's worth it for us to be here. You know, to just embrace this brother and say, I'm so proud of you. We are with you. We're for you. It's so worth it. And that's going to flow into just kind of the second part, the second thing we set our hearts to on this trip, which was to bring encouragement to people there. Carla's going to share a quick story here.
Yeah, and so I think we can go to the next slide. So this lovely group of people here were some couples that were kind of later on in their pregnancy. And so another deep desire of my heart was to go and do some childbirth education classes with women, with families there. And I am a certified birth educator and love doing that in the nations, particularly in areas where there's just no education about birth, pregnancy, postpartum care, newborn care. And I think the biggest desire of my heart was to go into refugee camps on the border of Myanmar. And throughout our time there, we were just kind of searching for the right connections to get in, and we didn't have those connections on this trip. And so this was another challenge that we really had to work through and kind of get the Lord's perspective. And you can't just walk into a refugee camp. You really have to have the right person who's already working and serving continually, and we didn't have that on this trip. And so I was just praying, like, okay, Lord, it's not going to happen through there. Like, where are you going to open the doors? I just really want to serve women in this way and come alongside them in their pregnancies and encourage and minister to them. And so I just started talking to pregnant women in Chiang Mai and talking to them about their birth experiences. And the Lord opened up several different conversations. And so that was fruitful. And then at the end of our trip, I was able to connect with a woman who knew many different women in a village outside of Chiang Mai. And so I drove about an hour outside of Chiang Mai and taught a class with some couples there. And so it felt like a lot of little beginnings unto maybe bigger connections in the future. And so just really needed to get like the Lord's perspective of going in slow. And it's okay if not a lot happens at once, but believing there's going to be more fruit from this. But I think another, just as a testimony, thing that did happen on this trip was I was able to get all of my birth education notes translated into the Thai language. And so I'm just really thankful for that and the door that the Lord opened for a good translation, and used those notes with these women. They're like, yes, this is the right language. And I was just really thankful how the Lord was moving in that way, and just the door to minister to families.
Yeah, so good. I was going to make a joke earlier, and I was like, I'm not going to, but I'm going to. And I was just going to say, my wife is way more comfortable in a room with a woman delivering a baby than she probably is standing in front telling these stories. So if you ever get to that point and you need someone who's confident and can help you bring that baby forth, this is her. But as I was saying, that the third part of what the Lord really put in our hearts to go and do, so worship, this equipping, and then encouragement. And I really believe, both from the years we were in China, our time since, and the young people we've been blessed to connect with, that the ministry of encouragement is necessary to sustain what the Lord is doing in the mission movement. That there's so many difficult places that where he's sending people now, are the last and the least reached, requires a whole tribe back home that says, we're for you, we believe in you, we're with you in this. The beautiful part of this is that it's something any one of you can do right from your home. Is finding missionaries that you could connect with and encourage. And so we went into this trip knowing that it's really in our hearts to serve and to minister to these different teams that we're connected with. If you could back up one. One of the teams that we spend a lot of our time with is called the Golden Shores Initiative, GSI. And this is a ministry in Chiang Mai that is solely looking at Myanmar and seeking to resource and see revival in Myanmar. This summer, we joined the leadership team of this organization, heading up the prayer side of the ministry. But the team on the ground is in Chiang Mai, and so we spent a lot of time with this team. It's mostly young singles, these women here on the right, and just offered ourselves to be available to process life, to pray together, to do some coaching, to do some inner healing prayer ministry times with them, and really saw the Lord move through that. And it's just this bringing a cup of fresh water that renews and restores and helps them say, hey, we can do this. Let's sign back up and go after it. The other team that we've mentioned already that we spent time with was the YWAM team. And so here are a few different couples on the team that we were able to spend time with and minister to. And I'm just going to share this really briefly, but I mentioned that over the last few years, we've been building this worship and prayer online training program with a dear friend of mine at the YWAM base. And about 6 months ago, he hit a point of real pain and difficulty. He went through some deep depression that ultimately led his family off the field. And so some of our time with this team was just processing the deep grief and sadness. This is something we all relate to. People get pulled into places of pain, and relationships get pulled apart, and it's deeply painful. And so just in the nature of wanting to be real, because we're family, and family's real, and family goes through pain and mess. Like, this was actually a deep point of grieving for us on this trip, where for me, it's like, man, I so loved running with this brother. And it's been painful feeling like I've been running alone for the past months. And it's one of those storylines that doesn't have a fairy tale ending right now, other than, Jesus, you're worth it, we're going to keep moving. But there were some of these places of coming alongside of friends and saying, we hurt and we ache for this brother, and encouraging and comforting each other, but at the same time seeing this is not over, the story hasn't resolved yet. And that was a significant part of our time there, of being able to process those places with the Lord and with this team, and then being able to serve each other and encourage each other in that place. The one last thing that we want to share as we wrap up is part of that encouragement and that family is walking out assignments together. And so we had a really, really amazing trip that Mariah referenced, going to a place called Mae Sot. Has anybody heard of Mae Sot? Mae Sot is on the border of Thailand and Myanmar. It's separated by a river. You can't really see the river here, but we're on the Thai side, and everything to our right, there's a river there. Everything on the other side of the river is Myanmar. So we got to stand on the border looking at Myanmar, blessing the land. Carla's going to share just a little bit about that trip.
So we were just in Mesot for 4 days and had never really heard of it before, but wanted to come alongside the GSI team and just serve them in this assignment. But the Lord just really moved in really powerful ways throughout our time there. And this area here, this slum, was one of the poorest areas that I had ever set eyes on. And I think that it was really significant for our kids to see this level of poverty. But this area was called No Man's Land. So it's like in the river, like it's this dump that people live in, like a sandbar in the river. And it's right between Myanmar and Thailand. So they've kind of gotten out of Myanmar, but they're not quite in Thailand. And so there's like no government controlling them. So they're kind of safe, but it's run by drug lords and a lot of corrupt crime happening there. Like it's not a safe place. So we're able to just pray over this area as well as visit some other slums in the city. Jail is holding a bag of food, and we gathered food bags together and just were able to pray and bless families in the slum and share the gospel with, was it 7 different families? And all through Google Translate, because we didn't have a translator with us at that moment.
So these are all Burmese people. So we'd find one person in the home who could speak Thai, because Google Translate doesn't work into Burmese. And so we would speak in English, Google Translate would speak it to them in Thai, then they would translate it into Burmese. And somehow, like, they were willing to do that with us and hearing the gospel and being touched and asking questions.
But had some significant, like, long conversations and prayer times with these families through multiple languages. So we're just really thankful. We felt like the Lord moved in the midst of language barriers. And then, as Mariah shared, we went to a children's home and it was a pastor that had a church, and they didn't even start a children's home, but they just had children coming. And so they kind of had to put one together, and it was children that were fleeing across the border illegally coming into Thailand. And so it became like a place of refuge. And so while we were there were about 65 young people that had just arrived a week ago. And as Mariah mentioned, we were just floored by how content these children were. They were learning worship songs. And starting to give their lives to Jesus, and just seeing them touched and moved in really powerful ways. Daniel was able to speak that Sunday and shared the gospel, and every single one of them responded. And we know those are, maybe little seeds, maybe some of them are doing it because their friend is, but we don't want to discount what the Lord was doing and believe that he was moving, that he was touching their hearts, and are excited for all of the locals that were there. They love these children dearly, like love them as their own, and are continuing to do follow-up and discipleship with them and just caring for them 24/7. And so our children especially were touched, and we were so proud of them. I mean, they just jumped into leading Sunday school classes and playing games, playing soccer with the boys, and developing friendship with them. And it was just exciting, and just felt really stirred in our hearts and in awe of what the Lord was doing for our own kids in Mesot.
Yeah, Mesot it's one of those kind of melting point cities where, there was people from Pakistan and India and the Middle East and Burma and all of these places. And again, we arrived, we didn't have much planned, but we knew it's significant that we set our feet on this land and we bless this place. And so we stood on the banks of the shore, and we're blessing Myanmar, we're blessing Mesot, we're blessing Thailand. And we did that with the GSI team. Just as we kind of wrap up this morning, one thing that we feel the Lord has called us to, and we feel this for the bridge as well, is that we are going to increasingly see regions thrown into chaos and turmoil and destruction as we approach the return of Jesus. Scripture's clear about that. There's going to be war and rumors of war. There's going to be so much animosity and division and all of these things happening. And we believe that one of the key invitations of the Lord is him actually saying who will step in to the vacuum of a region and shift things in the place of prayer and worship. We believe Myanmar is in that moment where it's this hinge point of history for Myanmar, to borrow a Luengo phrase, the hinge of history, where the story has not been decided yet. And if people will rise up in the place of prayer, will rise up in the place of worship, that they're the ones who actually get to decide how the story ends. And so this trip was very much part of that as well. And even unto that, I think there's a few more photos between. Here's some more from Mesa, just some local people that we got to minister to. Got to share the gospel with these two guys who were in the Thai army, and they were really receptive. But as we kind of look at what's next, the Lord has really gripped us. One of the things, and this is just a practical way that you guys can get connected, is we are heading up an International Day of Prayer for Myanmar on November 17th. This is going to be an 8-hour Zoom prayer meeting where there's 8 locations that are each going to lead an hour. Several of them are in Myanmar. One of them's in Thailand, Australia, a few of them here in the States. The IHOP prayer room is going to lead the final hour. But I'd love to have you join as much or as little of that as you're able to. You don't really have an excuse because it starts at 3 a.m. our time. So it's not like you're working, well, maybe, but it's from 3 to 11. And that's mainly so that it can be a decent time in the other half of the world. But if you scan that, there's a Zoom registration for the webinar. You'll get a link, and you can just jump on and join for that. The last thing that we want to mention is, again, this idea of places where there are a lot of questions about which way this could go. One of those that our eyes and our hearts are set on is Taiwan. So if you've been following the news, the Chinese government just finished their 20th Congress for the Communist Party. Xi Jinping is in for the next 5 years. And in his opening speech, he brought to the forefront that in the very near future, the reunification of China and Taiwan is going to happen, according to his ideology, his ideas. We recognize that this is a significant moment for Taiwan, that Taiwan has been chosen and blessed by the Lord to be a free country where training and sending and worship and missions and all of these things can be fueled and go forth from. And so we're joining with a few friends that lead a few ministries here in the States. Carla and I are, and we're going to be heading to Taiwan for 12 days. We're leaving in a couple weeks, so we'll be gone November 8th until the 20th. We're going to be in Tainan in Taiwan. And this is really just a kind of a preliminary scouting trip, just to get our feet on the ground, to see what's happening there, to talk with the local believers and look at how can we help serve and strengthen you guys in the place of intercession. How can we help fuel the prayer movement that will, as it was in the days of Reese Howells, that will resist the enemy's purposes to subdue the advance of the gospel through dictators and different ungodly power structures, so that the name of Jesus can continue to go forth. So we'd love your prayers for that, and we'd love, just as a church family, that we would be praying for these regions, for Myanmar, for Taiwan, that we'd be looking at the news and tracking with what God is doing in these places. So we wanted to mention that. We're going to be gone for a few more Sundays, but would love your prayers. I want to just finish with, if Zion, is he still in here? There he is. Zion, can you just play? I know we're at the time, but you don't have to go cook lunch. It's already cooked for you, right? I want to just have a moment where we can just respond to the Lord. You know, we were excited to get to share stories this morning, but again, more than stories of our trip, you know, the Lord is doing something with the bridge. I believe it's in two realms. I believe one, he is stirring the bridge to be a ministry that impacts nations in a very focused way. And that's not just the Grenz family, but that's each of us. And I believe that's some of you that have had dreams and different words and stirrings in your heart for nations. Some of the children in here, even hearing these stories, the Lord is supernaturally planting seeds in your heart for people that have never heard the name of Jesus. You know, we want to respond to that. And simultaneous to that, There's places where things have not gone the way we thought. Life has gotten busy. Circumstances have changed. Disappointment has set in. And I believe in both of those, whether it's this piece of touching nations or just this piece of my heart is disappointed because things did not happen the way I wanted them to happen. That the Lord is saying this morning, I'm looking. My eyes are looking, and the scripture that was just ringing in my heart is in Genesis 22. And I want us just to stand together for a few minutes of response. In Genesis 22, the Lord searches out Abraham. You know, he had given the promise of Isaac, and Abraham was raising his two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, and thinking things are going just like I want them to go. This is amazing. And the Lord calls out to Abraham. He says, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham says, here I am. And that phrase, here I am, was stirring in my heart this morning. In Hebrew, it's the word Hanani. Hanani, it's not just this idea of when the teacher calls roll and you say present. But when Abraham said, here I am, he was expressing, I am fully ready, fully present to obey whatever comes next, to obey whatever follows the call of my name. And as we know, the story goes, and the Lord says, I want you to give me your only son Isaac. I want you to sacrifice him to me. And Abraham goes on, and two more times in the story, the Lord calls to Abraham and he says, Hanani, here I am. And that last time, it's when his hand is raised up, ready to follow through and to kill his own son Isaac. And it says the angel of the Lord cried out, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Hanani, Lord, that even though I don't know how this will play out, even though it deeply pains me to walk this road, I trust you. I believe that you're still worth it. I believe that you're still good, and my yes is still given to you. The Lord says, Abraham, I've heard you, I've seen you, and I know that you will hold nothing back. And I believe this morning that in many different ways, but in ways that speak deeply to places of longing, places of promise, and places of questions that are not yet answered, disappointments that are not yet resolved, the Lord is speaking your name this morning. He's saying, Cheryl, Cheryl. He's saying, Robin, Robin. He's saying, David, David. He's speaking your name, Josiah, Josiah. And he's inviting you and he's inviting us to this fresh response. He says, Lord, here I am. I don't have it all together. I don't have it all figured out. I don't know where this is going. I'm stirred with promise. I've been given a promise of blessing in nations and descendants. And Lord, I say that more than needing the answers, Lord, this is our response today. More than needing the answers, more than needing things to be neat and all resolved in the way that we had thought they would be. Lord, we say yes to you today. We trust you today. We don't want to miss an opportunity. We don't want to miss out in places of disappointment and discouragement from giving you the sacrifice of worship that you're so due. And in the process, discovering a place of intimacy that we cannot touch, that we cannot get to apart from pain and suffering and sorrow. Lord, here we are. Just take a minute in your own words, in your own places of promise or pain, places of hope or discouragement, places of blessing or confusion, to say to him, here I am, Lord. Here I am. You still have my yes. Lord, we've journeyed too long
We've seen too much. We've touched your goodness too many times to believe you're anything other than good and faithful, to believe that you're anything other than kind and compassionate. And so we say today, God, we don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to know what this is unto. We don't have to be assured that this is going to play out for our own well-being and security. But we individually, as families and as the bridge, we say this morning, Lord, Hanani, here we are. As Isaiah said, when you said, who will go? Whom shall we send? He said, Hanani, Lord, behold me, look at me. We say this morning, God, before all of heaven, Lord, behold us. As your eyes search to and fro throughout the earth, behold the bridge. Behold these families, Lord. Here we are. Lord, even as we remember your faithfulness on this trip to Thailand, as we reach for your faithfulness on this trip to Taiwan, as we pray and declare your faithfulness on the Whāgutus in Hawaii and others in this room, and they're coming and they're going, we say, Hanani, Lord. And I ask, God, you lead us forward in faith, that you lead us forward in worship, in singing, in dancing, as families and as the bridge. Here we are, Lord, send us. We love you. We bless you. Lord, thank you for family that can go to the nations together, that can enjoy a Sunday afternoon with soup and fellowship together. What a gift, Lord. We say thank you in the name of Jesus.
If you need to go and get your kids from nursery, you can feel free to go. We bless you guys. But as we're closing, if the band is able to play a little bit longer, one of our favorite things to do is just pray over people that just feel an inkling, a stirring in their hearts for the nations. And if that's you, whether you are 2 years old or old in your age, we just invite you to come on down, and we'd love to pray over you as we're closing here. If you feel the Lord is stirring you for a specific people group or just somewhere in the nations, and believe that the Lord really wants to release callings and assignments today. The Lord gave me a prophetic word when I was 11 years old, several different words when I was 11 of going to the nations and raising me up as a missionary. So we really believe that He is speaking to the children in this room today. So that is you. We'd love to pray over you this morning.
Yes, so we are finished. Have a blessed Sunday, but we'll stay up here for a few minutes. And if you want prayer for that or anything else, we'd love to do that. Be blessed. Have a great week. We love you guys.
Moving in this place, we worship you. I worship you. You are here. Moving in this place, I worship you. I worship you. You are here. You are here. Moving in this place, I worship you. I worship you. You are here. Moving in our midst, I worship you. I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle work, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 You are here, moving in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Yeah. That is who you are. That is who you are. Yeah, yeah, that is who you are. That is who you are. You waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. That is who you are. Way